I wanted to begin this morning by sharing with you a story about a little boy who always wanted to go to a circus. One day, this little boy was walking down the street when he saw a poster in a store window. And the poster said that a circus was coming to town and that a ticket to the circus cost $1. The boy ran home and asked his father if he could give him $1 to go to the circus on Saturday. His father said, if you work hard and get all of your chores done, then he would give him $1 to go to the circus. Well, Saturday morning came and the boy got up early and did all of his chores. I have all my chores done, the little boy told his dad. The boy's father gave him that $1, and the boy headed into town filled with excitement about seeing the animals and the trapeze artists and all of the things that come with a circus. Since he arrived in town so early, he was on the front row when the circus parade started down the main street of town. The boy was thrilled when the animals and the other circus acts paraded by. At the end of the parade came the clowns, and following the clowns was the ringmaster. And when the ringmaster passed by where he was standing, the boy ran out into the middle of the street, took out that folded $1 bill and shoved it into the ringmaster's pocket. "Thanks, mister," said the boy. "That was a great circus." Then he turned around and walked home. He thought he had been to the circus, but he had only been to the parade. And if we're not careful, we can be like that little boy. We can get so caught up in the celebrations and the decorations and the gifts that we miss the main event. I want to talk to you today about not missing Christ this Christmas. With all of the planning and the preparation and the hustle and the bustle, sometimes we miss the main event. In Matthew's Gospel, chapter number 2, starting at verse number 1, it records the first Christmas. It records when Jesus, our Lord and Savior, is born. Not only does Matthew record it, but Luke also records it and adds in some other details. But let's look at Matthew and let's look at the first Christmas. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the time of King Herod, Magi or wise men from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who was to be born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all of Jerusalem with him. And when he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "In Bethlehem and in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. And as soon as you find him, report to me so that I too may go and worship him." After they had heard the king, they went on their way. And the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. And when they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshiped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. And this is the word of the Lord. Matthew, and so does Luke, records the very first Christmas. And what's interesting about the first Christmas is that it seems like it continues to repeat itself. At the very first Christmas, people missed Christ. And still to this day, it seems that Christmas comes and goes year after year after year, and so many of us miss Christ, even during the Christmas season, the season where we are to celebrate his birth. King Herod missed Christmas because he was preoccupied with power. King Herod heard about the birth of Jesus Christ, and he heard about this new king, and of course, King Herod got upset. Why wouldn't he get upset? He would get upset because he was the king. And as he's king, these wise men come into town talking about, we're looking for a new king. We're looking for this king that was born. And of course, King Herod gets up in arms. He gets upset. He gets bothered by it simply because he wanted to maintain his power. He was so preoccupied with his power that he missed out on the opportunity to meet Christ. He was afraid of losing his throne. His security was wrapped up in him being in control. How many of us find our security in feeling like we're in control? I've got news for you. You're not. As much as you think you're in control of everything that's happening around you, you're not. And so many of us are afraid to turn over control of our lives because we're not sure what that would happen. What would it look like if I completely gave God control of my life? If I came off of the throne of my life and surrendered it and said, God, I want you to sit on the throne of my life and use me for however you want to use me. What would your life look like? Some of us are afraid of even the thought. And the reason that we're afraid is because we feel that we have too much to lose. Jesus may not get with my agenda. Jesus may not go in the direction I want him to go in. Jesus may not do the things that I want him to do. And we feel that in order for us to have the life and to live the life that we want to live, then it means that we've got to remain king of our lives, that we've got to remain on the throne. And here's what Jesus says to all of us. He says, whoever finds their life will lose it. In other words, whoever wants to maintain and sitting on the throne and maintain that power and not turn it over to him, he says, you will lose it. But then he says this, and whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. King Herod was so preoccupied with maintaining his power and maintaining his throne. He was so preoccupied with protecting a certain life that he wanted to live, that he was so preoccupied with that he missed out on the opportunity to meet Christ that first Christmas. And until you and I turn over control of our lives to Christ, we'll never experience life, and that life more abundantly. You will never find Christ as long as you are on the throne of your life. He must be your King. He must be your Savior. He must be Lord of all. I'm wondering if this Christmas season you would be willing to say, Christ, you take control. Not only did King Herod miss Christ because he was preoccupied with power, but the religious leaders missed Christ because they were preoccupied with pretending. They were more concerned with looking the part. They had all the decorations and the gifts and the tree and the party, but Christ was never invited. They were more concerned with looking like the people of God than actually being the people of God. You know how we do. We talk about, we say all the right things. We put our big star on the top of the tree. We plaster all kinds of decorations all over the house. And we talk about how this is the best time of the year. It's Christmas. It's the time. We've got joy to the world and behold the Lamb and all of these things. And we put on this facade, but Jesus is nowhere to be found. Through all of that, we don't want to see Jesus. We just want people to see how much we celebrate Christmas. And they missed Christ. The church folk, the religious folk, missed Christ because they were so preoccupied with pretending that they had a form of godliness, but they weren't connected to the power source. I'm wondering this Christmas season, are you going to pretend that Christ is what you're celebrating? Or are you going to go after the real thing? Will you make Christ central this Christmas season? Not only did King Herod miss Christ because he was preoccupied with power, or the religious leaders missed Christ because they were preoccupied with pretending, but Luke says that the innkeeper missed Christ because he was preoccupied with secondary priorities. Remember in Luke where it says that Mary and Joseph showed up in Bethlehem, and the reason they went to Bethlehem was because there was a census going on. And Joseph was from Bethlehem, and so they had to go to where they were from so that they could be counted. And when they show up there, Mary's with child, she's pregnant, she shows up to this inn, she shows up to another one, but if she goes, and they said there's no room at the inn. You know how it goes. They end up in a stable. Jesus is wrapped up and put in a manger. Why? Because the innkeeper was so busy preparing for Christmas that he missed Christ. So busy putting the list together of everyone that's going to be invited over for Christmas, putting together the list of all the gifts that were going to be given, looking forward to receiving gifts, putting all the decorations just where they need to be, running and ripping for that last minute gift at the mall, catching that last cyber sale online, so busy running around, making sure that the house was neat and everything was together so that when their guests came over, that everything was just right. And Christ shows up, but there's no room for him. Because they were preoccupied with secondary priorities. What's your priority this Christmas season? I shouldn't say what's your priority. I should say, who's your priority? I know, because think about it. Don't raise your hand, but think about it. When you were thinking about all the people you were going to give gifts to, it's Christ's birthday. Where was he on the list? Just say, ouch. And we're thinking about all of these other secondary priorities, and we miss out on the most important. It's Christ. Are all the rooms in your life so filled that there's no room for Christ? Is Christ knocking on the door and you're saying, I'm too busy putting up my tree? Too busy preparing for a dinner party? I'm too busy checking my list and checking it twice that I don't have room for Christ. Am I rhyming? That I don't have room for Christ. And I want to challenge us this year, as we're in this Christmas season, not to relegate it just to the Christmas season, but that we would start thinking about, am I so preoccupied with other things that I don't make room for Christ? Is Christ not central in my life? I want to read you the story about this woman named Ruth. One Christmas Eve morning, Ruth went to her mailbox and found a letter. It had no stamp and no postmark on it. It just had her name and address. And this is what the letter said to Ruth. Dear Ruth, I'm going to be in your neighborhood this evening, and I'd like to stop by for a visit. Love always, Jesus. Well, her hands started shaking as she placed the letter on the table. Why would the Lord want to visit me? I'm nobody special. I don't have anything to offer. With that thought, Ruth remembered her empty kitchen cabinets. I'll have to run down to the store and buy something for dinner. She reached for her purse and counted all the money that she had, $5.40. Well, I can get some bread and some cold cuts at least. After buying a few things at the store, Ruth started walking home quickly. Ruth had been so absorbed in her dinner plans that she hadn't even noticed two figures huddled in the alleyway, a man and a woman, both of them dressed in little more than rags. Look, lady, the man said, I ain't got a job, and my wife and I have been living out here on the street, and now it's getting cold, and we're getting kind of hungry. Could you help us? We'd really appreciate it. Ruth looked at both of them. They were dirty. They smelled bad. Sir, I'd like to help you, but I'm a poor woman myself. All I have is some meat and some bread, and I'm having an important guest for dinner tonight. And I was planning on serving this to him. All right, we understand. Thanks anyway. The man put his arm around his wife's shoulders, and they headed back into the alley. As Ruth watched them leave, she felt a familiar twinge in her heart. Sir, wait! The couple stopped and turned as she ran down the alley after them. Look, why don't you take this food? I'll figure something else out to serve my guest. She handed the man the grocery bag. Thank you, lady. Thank you very much. Yes, thank you. Ruth could see the man's wife was shivering. Ruth then replied tenderly, you know, I've got another coat at home. Here, why don't you take this one? Ruth unbuttoned her jacket and slipped it over the woman's shoulders. Then smiling, she turned and walked back to the street without her coat and with nothing to serve her guest. Thank you, lady. Thank you very much, the man and his wife said again. Ruth was chilled by the time she reached her front door and worried too. The Lord was coming to visit. She didn't have anything to offer him. She fumbled through her purse to find the door key, but as she did, she noticed another envelope in her mailbox. That's odd. The mailman doesn't usually come twice in one day. She took the letter out of the box and opened it. And here's what the letter said. Dear Ruth, it was so good to see you again. Thank you for the lovely meal, and thank you too for the beautiful coat. Love always, Jesus. I'm sure you've been making plans on how much you want to celebrate Christ. But let's not get so caught up in the small stuff that we miss him this season. I want to share with you just a couple of suggestions that I hope will help you to see Christ this Christmas season. If you would, write some of them down. The first suggestion I'd like to offer is if you'd like to see Christ and make him central this Christmas season, is give to someone in need. Would you consider finding someone in need and being a blessing to them? I know what you're thinking. Well, I don't have a whole lot. It's not about how much you have, it's how much you're willing to give. Jesus, he puts it this way, for I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in. I needed clothes and you clothed me. I was sick and you looked after me. I was in prison and you came to visit me. Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you? Or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you? And the king will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. Then he will say to those on his left, depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger and you didn't invite me in. I needed clothes and you didn't clothe me. I was sick and in prison and you didn't look after me. They also will answer, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or needing clothes or sick or in prison and didn't help you? And he will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me. I wonder if there's room at your Christmas dinner table for one more. I wonder if there's room for somebody who doesn't have a gift that maybe we could pass on one of the many gifts that we have to somebody else. I'm wondering if there's a family in your neighborhood that could use a ham. Someone on your job who's got a bunch of kids and they're struggling and they could use some help. I'm wondering if you're willing to see and meet Christ this Christmas by doing something for the least of them. You want to see Christ this Christmas? Find someone in need. Every year around this time, we do what's called Blessing in a Bag, and we do it every month, every third Saturday of the month, we give out a bag of groceries to the people in our community who may need some help or don't have all the things that we have. And I'm wondering if this Christmas season, maybe God is inviting you to be a blessing to a family in this community by saying, you know what, I'm gonna buy a box. I'm gonna donate the money for a family to be able to enjoy Christmas because I'm gonna be enjoying my meal, and I don't want to just go around being blessed and celebrating how blessed I am, but I want to say I'm blessed to be a blessing. $25, you can feed a family this Christmas season. Here's another suggestion. Clear time and space to focus on Christ. Clear just a little bit of time and space to make him the focus. Psalm 46:10 says this, the beginning part of that verse. It simply says, be still and know that I am God. I want to encourage you as things are busy and there are a lot of things that you have to do. And I hope that you buy a bunch of gifts, and I hope that you receive a bunch of gifts, and I hope that you go to a bunch of Christmas dinners and do all of those things and connect with family and friends. It's a wonderful time of the year to do that as we celebrate the birth of Christ. But I also hope that you carve out some time to just focus on Christ. I hope that this Christmas season, somewhere along the way, as kids are opening gifts or before or after, you gather your family together and say, now let's celebrate Jesus, the greatest gift. Maybe you gather and maybe you can't sing like Elder Noe or play the keyboard like Brother Joel, but you gather your family together and say, let's sing a song to Jesus. It's his birthday. And maybe the praises of God are ringing out of your house, and maybe it's not on 2 and 4, and maybe it's not in harmony, or maybe it's not in key, but you're making a joyful noise unto your Lord this Christmas season, because we're going to clear some time and space to focus on, I don't want to miss Christ this Christmas season. That when guests come over to your house, they don't dictate how you celebrate Christmas. You set the atmosphere. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. You can spend the night, but on Sunday morning, we're going to. I can't make you come, but we're going. Why? Because it's an opportunity for me to show you what's important, and it's Christ. We're celebrating. Gee, how can we stay up all night and eat all this food and dance and be merry and then not go to the house of the Lord? What kind of witness would I be for Christ? And then lastly, surrender your heart this Christmas. Surrender your heart. Make him Lord over all of your life? What have you been hanging on to that you have not been willing to surrender to Him because you're afraid of what you would give up? You're afraid of what you would lose. And what you should be afraid of is what you won't gain by giving it up. Surrendering your heart to Him and saying, God, I want you to rule and reign in every area of my life. There's no room in my life that you're excluded from. I want to make space in every area. I want to make space in the areas where I'm successful and I'm doing well. And I also want to invite you into the areas of my life where I'm struggling, trying to get things together, trying to get things on the right track. But I know I won't be able to do it unless you come in. I'm going to make room for you this Christmas. I want you to rule in my heart. You may be here and you're not saved. You haven't made Jesus Christ your Lord and your Savior. And I want to invite you this Christmas to consider opening up that Jesus is here even now and He's knocking. And all He wants you to do is say, there's room. There's room. Come on in. He's not worried about how things are prepared. He's not worried about how clean or how dirty things are. He says, I'll come in just the way things are. But when I get in there, I'll start to change some things. I'll start to rearrange some things. You don't have to worry. Just let me take over. And I'll set it up. I'll make all the necessary changes and provisions. Just follow my lead. Make Him the Lord of your life, Lord in your heart. Would you stand with me this morning?